Tonight on Reporting Scotland. The First Minister pledges an extra £250 million for mental health services as a key part of her plans for the coming year at Holyrood. From food to pharmacies, we look at how a no-deal Brexit might affect all our lives. Scotland's first urban road with average speed cameras sees a huge drop in speeding offences and injuries.
No wonder they're celebrating. It's history. For the first time ever, Scotland's women will be at the World Cup.
Yes, Scotland's women are going where the men's team haven't been for some years, the World Cup finals. And we meet Billy Gilmour, hailed as one of the brightest talents of his generation and the future of Scottish football. Good evening. £250 million of extra funding for mental health services is at the heart of the Scottish Government's plans for the coming year. However, the pledge came on the same day Scotland recorded its worst ever performance on child and adolescent mental health waiting times. Other priorities in the programme for government include growing the economy and more investment in building projects like schools and hospitals. But opposition parties said it showed a government well past its sell-by date. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
At Leith Academy, where they're learning about well-being, some advice from the First Minister.
Do something you enjoy.
Running a government's not always a pleasure, especially when mental health waiting times for younger people are at a record high. Mental health workers say services are under strain.
There's lots of great people doing amazing work out there, and mental health services do work, but people are really under-resourced. They're doing the best with what they can with limited resources.
At Holyrood, the First Minister promised to spend £250 million over the next few years, expanding mental health care, including new counselling in schools.
We will also put in place plans to fast-track young people with the most serious mental illness to specialist services, as well as taking targeted action in the short term to reduce the longest waits for services.
The programme includes boosting infrastructure spending on schools, hospitals and roads, tackling loneliness and isolation with a new national strategy, and setting new drug driving limits to improve road safety. Head teachers will be empowered to decide on the curriculum and staffing under a new charter by the end of this year. But Conservatives said that was no substitute for the education bill the government dropped.
Do not stand there and say that you care about the children of Scotland so much you need a radical bill, ditch the bill and then say the bill didn't matter in the first place. Don't you dare!
Nicola Sturgeon said she'd continue to resist Brexit and decide how best to protect Scottish interests.
It is clear that an increasing number of our fellow citizens believe, as we do, that the best future for Scotland lies in becoming an independent country. Presiding Officer.
Opponents said she lacked vision.
Based on this programme, this government's sell-by date is well past. After 11 years in power, this government is showing all the signs of being at the end.
Where is the vitality? Where is the driving force? Where is the real radical vision in this programme for government?
Other plans for the year ahead include paying grants to new parents under Holyrood's expanding welfare powers, toughening penalties for animal cruelty in the most serious cases, and recognising transgender people in future population surveys. On the environment, hundreds of new low-emission vehicles are to be added to public sector fleets, but Greens want much more.
We do need to recognise that the scale of what's being proposed bears no relationship to the scale of the challenge.
As the government unwrapped its programme, Parliament revealed plans for next month's Festival of Politics. But you won't have to wait till then to hear thoughts and opinions collide in this place. Holyrood is back. Glenn Campbell, Reporting Scotland.
Well, as we've heard, more money has been promised for mental health services. Half of all mental illnesses start before the age of 14. So getting early help for children who are struggling is the focus of the government's plans. Our health correspondent, Lisa Summers, looks at what impact this new money may make.
So what happens in here?
The First Minister is making mental health a priority.
Are people much more open about talking about it now?
Especially in the school. Everyone makes you feel welcome. So it makes you feel really safe and just, you kind of just want to be here.
Leith Academy has specially trained teachers to support pupils. They've created this nurture base where young people can take time out or visit when they need help.
If I'm feeling really down in a day because something's happened, I can actually go somewhere.
And a lot of issues happen mentally with yourself and you don't really know what's going on. So to have that support and have that someone who you can speak to and who can help you, it's really helpful.
I'm partly schizophrenic and I thought they would be able to deal with that. But they're also good at giving you the help to support you with that and offering help outside of the school in case it's not enough.
This is the sort of space that aims to help children, taking the pressure off NHS mental health services, CAMHS. Figures today show these services are struggling more and more. Over 4,600 children started treatment in the 3-month period to June. Of those, around 1,500 had waited more than 18 weeks for an appointment. And around 50 of those had waited over a year to be seen. The government admits this is not acceptable. That's what's behind today's record investment. Plans include mental health counselling for every secondary school, more training for teachers and community support for families. It's been welcomed by charities, but some say it needs to start even earlier.
We know that emotional well-being, mental health develops at a very early age, and we really need to make sure that we offer families early help. So while school counsellors may well be important, they tend to be useful at a point at which things are already difficult for children.
The spending is big and the plan's ambitious. The target to be measured will ultimately be a healthier, happier Scotland. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, our political editor, Brian Taylor, is at Holyrood for us this evening. Brian, we heard different viewpoints in the chamber, and depending on your political point of view, a steady and sure set of plans or light on content. What's your assessment?
Jackie, this is what it's all about. This is the programme for government launched by Nicola Sturgeon today with her statement. As you heard in Glenn's report, their opposition leaders characterising the statement as tired. I think there are perhaps two elements that characterise the content of the statement, and just as there's a binary approach here, delivering for today, investing for tomorrow, there's a binary approach to the overall characterisation. There's continuity, but there's also the idea of distraction and disruption. The continuity comes in that this quite deliberately is a statement that builds upon last year. It builds upon existing and established policies, perhaps in health, perhaps in education, the mental health one being a case in point where it is a substantial increase, but building upon an existing attempt to give parity of treatment to those with mental health illness and those with physical illnesses. The disruption comes from, guess what? Brexit, as all of the body politic across these aisles is being disrupted by Brexit, so it is the case here as well. Nicola Sturgeon is not in control of Brexit. One might ask who is, but she is buffeted by that, and so she has to adapt, she has to accommodate, she has to cope rather than perhaps deliberately control. And so what she is doing with the economy, with those economic policies on exports, on capital investment, is deliberately setting those in the context of Brexit, saying that she is seeking to mitigate what she regards as being the catastrophic impact of Brexit. It is a policy for coping.
Thank you very much, Brian Taylor there. Well, let's get the latest Brexit developments. Let's go to Westminster. The Parliament returned today after the summer break. Let's speak to our correspondent, Nick Ardley. The Brexit Secretary, the UK Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, has been speaking within the last couple of hours. What's he been saying?
Yeah, he is one of the people trying to control that process Brian was talking about there. He's told MPs in the last couple of hours he's still confident a deal can be reached with Europe. The UK Cabinet met for the first time after the summer holidays this morning and was told there had been a positive reception to the PM's Chequers proposals in Europe. But civil servants here are doing more and more work on the possibility that it might fall apart, that there might be no deal. Why? Well, firstly, because Brussels still has real concerns about what the UK government is proposing, and secondly, because there are still many MPs in the building behind me who are furious about what is on the table. Some think that they might vote to reject it, even if the Prime Minister managed to agree a deal with Brussels. So what would no deal look like? What would it mean beyond politics for average Scots? I've been finding out. Crucial phase, and UK ministers are warning it's possible the ultimate result could be no new trade arrangement. So what would the impact be if we crashed out without a deal? We've come to the borders to speak to Walter, who runs an exotic meat business. Large parts of what happens here is based on EU membership, and if it's harder to get food in and out of Europe, that'll have an impact. The special cows here.
These are the Wagyu herd, yes. There's two things. One is the price, and that would be an economic issue where the prices go up. If the UK just gets harder to trade with, it's just too much hassle. They'll just trade with more within the European mainland area, and then our supply effectively doesn't get cut off, but it dramatically gets reduced and squeezed, which means obviously we can't supply onto our customers as well, and that's probably a substantial worry to us.
And it's not just farms and warehouses. Additional costs and delays will have an impact on you and I and what's in supermarkets, particularly in remote parts of Scotland.
In the context of no deal, some prices may go up in supermarkets. They'll go up because there is an additional cost to import, and that might be because of taxes, import tariffs, or it might be because of delays in customs. No, we're not going to run out of food. But there are likely to be shortages of imported material and also potentially home-produced material that relies on imports to make it. Some of the fresh fruit and vegetables which come from abroad, I think that's likely to be less available perhaps in our remote and rural areas.
There have been warnings too about the impact no deal would have on medicine supplies. Around 9 in 10 of the medicines distributed in Scotland come from abroad. Half of them are from the EU.
The advice we're giving to our members is that stockpiling on an individual pharmacy or even patient basis is not something at the minute that we think would be necessary, so there's no need to panic. In the event of any potential disruption, patients on the front line receiving medicines from pharmacies on a day-to-day basis should not be noticing any difference.
And what if you want to get away from it all? Well, there could be some bad news there too.
We've had Brexit looming for a couple of years now, and more people have actually been booking holidays, and in terms of where holidaymakers may face some additional costs. It could be around the cost of a visa. Also, if you don't have access to European health insurance card, that might affect the price of your travel insurance. Data-free roaming when you go on holiday and you can use the internet in Europe as you do at home, that is likely to change.
The Scottish Government believes no deal could hit every person in Scotland by £2,300. Others dispute those figures, but an advisor to ministers in Edinburgh for the past decade says the impact is likely to be uneven.
I think a no-deal impact would be very negative for the Scottish economy, because it means that the future size of the Scottish economy will be smaller than it otherwise would have been. It'll be harder to trade, it'll be harder to trade in goods and services, it'll be harder for people to move around, so costs generally will rise, and that will have a negative impact on what Scotland is like. Individuals on the lowest incomes who are much worse off as a consequence of the no deal. They spend more of their budgets on food, they're more dependent on, it's a bigger share of their total expenditure. And food is the product which is going to be most severely affected because of the rules and regulations in relation to food and because of the tariffs in relation to food.
Other economists are more optimistic and think the long-term benefits will outweigh any negatives. But if no deal becomes a reality, the impact is likely to be significant. Nick Early, reporting Scotland.
Offenders jailed for short sentences were more likely to commit further offences, according to official figures. Overall, the reconviction rate is down, continuing a general trend over the past decade. The Justice Secretary says today's figures underline the belief that courts should instead consider community sentences as an alternative to custody, even though a third of those given community payback orders, mainly unpaid work, went on to commit a further crime. It's exactly a year since average speed cameras were installed for the first time on an urban road in Scotland, and the impact, it seems, has been dramatic, with a huge fall in the number of drivers caught speeding and far fewer car crashes. Our transport correspondent David Henderson reports from what used to be an accident black spot.
They're watching 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every vehicle on this stretch of Old Dalkeith Road has to keep to a speed limit of 30 miles an hour. Why? Well, George Henderson lives right next to the road, and he says it's been an accident black spot.
Well, since I've been here, I can say truthfully, there's been about 7 being killed on cars in that bad corner. And just not long ago, there were 3 of them killed just along there, just where that car is now. They come round the corner that fast, and a car was coming this way, and he had to take the middle of the road because there was a car parked in it and square on, like, you know. And it just, and that bus shelter's been knocked down about 6 times.
So this road's been chosen as the first in Scotland to have an average speed camera system. At over £110,000, it's not cheap, but the effect has been dramatic. Up until last year, an estimated 60% of motorists, that's 9,000 drivers every single day, were breaking the speed limit on this short section of road. Now, there's been a dramatic change, and these speed cameras catch just 2 people breaking the speed limit each day. These average speed cameras have had a similar impact on Scotland's trunk roads. Between Perth and Inverness, fewer motorists are being killed in accidents and more are keeping to the speed limit.
A successful camera to me is one that doesn't generate any offences, because that means it's maximising compliance. So we have an almost 100% compliance at Old Dalkeith Road, which is great news.
Strict rules govern where these cameras are used, but 2 more streets in the west of Scotland will soon have them installed. They're expensive, but the police believe it's a price worth paying to save lives. David Henderson, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
It's just after 7:15. A reminder of tonight's main story. The First Minister pledges an extra £250 million for mental health services as part of her plans for the coming year at Holyrood.
No wonder they're celebrating. It's history. For the first time ever, Scotland's women will be at the World Cup.
Yes, Scotland's women are going to take on the world. The boss of the Royal Bank of Scotland says it will take another 5 to 10 years to restore its reputation. It's been 10 years since it had to be saved from a catastrophic collapse. But Ross McEwen says he's now focused on preparing for Brexit and trying to win back customer trust. He's been speaking to our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser.
A pariah on a big pension. It's nearly a decade since Fred Goodwin was forced to quit the prestige Edinburgh headquarters from which he ran the world's biggest bank over a cliff.
There's a profound and unqualified apology for all of the distress that has been caused.
RBS required £45 billion of taxpayer support. 10 years on, his successor may at last have cleared up the mess with another recent penalty, this one £3.6 billion.
I think when you look back at all of the banks, it was all about growth. Growth. We have to be big to survive, and if we're not big, somebody else will take us out. And I think that was the problem with the industry, and it wasn't just the problem here, it was globally.
Do you understand the frustration, indeed the anger which boils over from people sometimes, that the bankers don't seem to have paid much of a price?
Well, look, I do, because I've lived this for 5 years as the CEO. This bank had to be saved by the public of the UK, and I get their frustration with that. I get their frustration with why haven't we got our 45 billion back? But the issue for me was the price was paid to actually save the UK economy because we were such a big part of it. And the consequences of that is putting £45 billion of taxpayer money into a bank, and you're unlikely to get it all back out again. My job has just been to create a good bank.
Do you think bankers have paid a significant price? At the senior level of banking, have they paid a significant price for the harm that was done?
When you look across the organisations, none of the senior teams were running those banks 10 years ago. But I get the frustration, absolutely get the frustration.
The people who were in charge, none of them are in jail, is the point.
Well, I think there was only one that actually ended up with any major penalties out of it.
After the financial crash, the problems continued with mishandling of business customers facing financial distress.
There was no intent, but it was the complete consuming of the business that so many business customers got into difficulty all at the same time. We were just completely swamped. No excuse. So there are a number of things that we just didn't get right.
Why should we believe that the attitude has changed permanently now?
Well, I think you've got a completely different set of executives running this business. There is no incentive for anybody around the massive growth in this business. It's around our customers, it's around the stability of this bank.
10 years ago, RBS was out of capital and cash. Now it has lots of both, in case a hard Brexit means a buffeting for its customers.
We've got a large number of very large corporates that operate in Western Europe that we bank. And we have lots of UK customers who trade into Europe that we cannot have any disruption for these customers. So we're planning, unfortunately, for the worst, because that's what we have to do as a bank. The next couple of months we're going to have to make some decisions about making sure we've got the licence, and if we don't, we're going to have to start thinking about what European customers we may not be able to bank. Now, that is not a decision.
You may have to shed customers.
We may have to if we don't get the right licences.
Take a trip to our travel money page for exchange rates. So what we've done is she helpfully takes you.
While bank technology moves on, the Royal Bank's reputation remains challenging.
My view is we've saved the bank, so the focus needs to be back on to how do we make this a really great bank for the UK and rebuild our reputation, which will, I think, take another 5 to 10 years. Now, that won't be me leading it for 5 to 10 years, but that's the path that we're now on.
Over the next month, RBS expects uncomfortable reminders of its meltdown 10 years ago, a milestone on the long and sometimes winding road to recovery. Douglas Fraser, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Sport now, and the Scotland women's football team have qualified for the World Cup for the first time. They knew they had to better Switzerland's result against Poland when they faced Albania this afternoon, and they did just that with a 2-1 win. Here's our senior football reporter, Chris McLaughlin.
With the national anthem blaring, Scotland were well aware of the task in hand. Win, hope Switzerland draw points, and it's World Cup, here we come. Oh, pressure. The start, though, was perfect. Arsenal's Kim Little almost bursting the net just to make sure of the opener. When the ball fell, it was never in doubt. After that, another looked certain, but Albania's number 1 continued to frustrate. Chelsea's Erin Cuthbert, known for the spectacular, passed up the straightforward. And just before the break, this. Scotland's defence nowhere to be seen, and it was all square. Knowing it was still goalless between Switzerland and Poland, Scotland pushed on, but the frustration continued. Eventually, though, the pressure paid off, this time the head of Jane Ross, and all of a sudden, it was back on. Jenny Beattie had the chance to wrap it all up late on, but it didn't matter. Scotland had done enough.
I'm lost for words. I don't know what to say apart from we knew that the game would be tough. We knew it would be like that. Throughout the campaign, Albania, Belarus, they've caused us problems because, we haven't dealt with the physical side of the game. And
after 20 years of hurt, these are the history makers. Scotland, finally, heading to the World Cup. Chris McLaughlin, reporting Scotland.
Well, to the men's game now, and hailed as one of the brightest football talents of his generation, Billy Gilmour left Rangers for Chelsea at the age of 16. Well, a year on, he has high ambitions, and he's been speaking to Jonathan Sutherland.
The world at his feet. 17 years of age, prodigiously talented, could Billy Gilmour be the star with the Scottish football fans smiling in the years to come?
What would you say is your ultimate ambition in football?
To become one of the best players.
In the world?
In the world, yeah. I think every kid's dream should be that. Never just to turn up to a game, I'm the best in this game. Like, every team you go to, you want to be the best, no matter what. And that's always been my ambition, to be the best football player.
And take Scotland to a major championship?
Yeah, definitely. That should be the next thing, yeah, hopefully.
At the age of just 16, Billy Gilmour impressed hugely for the Scotland under-21s at the prestigious Toulon tournament. Not only did he become the youngest ever Scotland under-21s goalscorer, he also won the Revelation of the Tournament award. He even wore the captain's armband as Scotland reached the semi-finals.
Billy Gilmour was training with the Rangers first team from the age of 15. At 16, he was linked with the likes of Bayern Munich and Barcelona before opting to join Chelsea. And at 17 years of age, he's already trained with the star-studded Chelsea first team. All signs of a real talent on fast forward.
He absolutely has got fabulous technical ability, but to play at the highest level, you need temperament. And we're certainly seeing that at the moment. It's potential and it's a progression, but it's a progression of a potentially a very, very good player.
And I've just fell in love with the game.
Talented, personable and marketable. The potential brings hype. So how does he cope with the pressure?
I just enjoy football. I just let that do in the pitch. None of that really bothers me. I'm too young for that. I just go out on the pitch and do my stuff, and that's what I enjoy. I just love football.
That love of the game has taken Billy Gilmour far. His next steps will be fascinating to watch. Jonathan Sutherland, reporting Scotland.
Well, now doing her stuff, it's Judith.
Thank you very much. And a very good evening to you. We did start the day off on a chilly note, and being the season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, we saw quite a bit of mist and fog, but that broadened out to be a beautiful day for many parts of the country. Look at the blue skies there over Shetland. We did have a bank of cloud across eastern areas, as you can see from the earlier satellite picture, but that will continue to thin and break. So much of Scotland seeing a dry evening, plenty of sunshine as well. Just that cloud filtering into the Western Isles, perhaps producing the odd shower. The dry conditions hold overnight, and it will be another chilly one as well. Temperatures in our towns and cities around about 5 or 6 Celsius, a little lower in the countryside, and even down to freezing, if not below, for the likes of Grampian, maybe in the borders and across parts of the Highlands with a touch of frost. And once again, we will see a few mist or fog patches developing as well. But a dry start, a cold start, a beautiful start to the day tomorrow, being Wednesday. Starting to see a weather front pushing into the far northwest during the morning, bringing some outbreaks of showery rain here eventually. But actually, for much of the day, it looks like the Northern Isles escaping dry, still holding on to pretty good sunny spells for Shetland and light winds. And Orkney not seeing that cloud until late afternoon. And really for the eastern side of the country, we're looking at dry conditions with some hazy sunshine. The clouds starting to spill in and not feeling too bad with light winds, 18 or 19 Celsius. But you can see that weather front taking hold across the Inner Hebrides, Kintyre, up towards the West Highlands and the Western Isles. Outbreaks of showery rain here. A bit of a breeze over the Western Isles as well. And it will be cooler, of course, too. So that weather front gradually extends across the country during the late afternoon and early evening. We should see something brighter coming into the Western Isles and the northwest corner. But as that front starts to clear away, you can see we're bringing in more weather fronts from the north, but also cooler air coming in from the north as well. So as we reach Thursday, it's a cloudier day, and indeed it's a cooler day, and we will see outbreaks of showery rain here and there. I think that's really the name of the game anywhere, catching the showers, and temperatures rising to around about 16 or 17 Celsius, but feeling cooler. That's your forecast.
Thank you very much, Judith. Now a reminder of tonight's main news. Labour's ruling National Executive Committee has agreed to adopt in full an international definition of anti-Semitism, but they also issued a statement aimed at protecting freedom of speech on Israel and the rights of Palestinians. And here, £250 million of extra funding for mental health services is at the heart of the Scottish Government's plans for the coming year. However, the pledge came on the same day Scotland recorded its worst ever performance on child and adolescent mental health waiting times. And that's Reporting Scotland. Our next update is at 10:30. Until then, from everyone on the team, good evening.